Whether you're talking about the Asante, the Kingdom of Congo, Luango, the Swahili Coast, Numidia, Garamantia, Egypt, Aksum, or any of these kingdoms, one thing is typical. They all seem to be obsessed with cleanliness. So I want to play a video that I uploaded about a year ago about the kingdom of Asante. It's 1 minute long, and it's a description of a flushable toilet inside of the kingdom of Asante.
In and is not the least of the many circumstances deciding their great superiority over the generality of Negroes was the discovery that every house had its cloaca besides the common ones for the lower orders without the town. They were generally situated under a small archway in the most retired angle of the building, but not unfrequently upstairs, within a separate room like a small closet, where the large hollow pillar also assists to support the upper story. The holes are of a small circumference, but dug to a surprising depth, and boiling water is daily poured down, which effectively prevents the least offense. The rubbish and offal of each house was burnt every morning at the back of the street, and they were as nice and cleanly in their dwellings as in their persons.
So, in order to investigate what is said over there, we have to first find out what a cloaca is. And a cloaca is a drainage system. Cloaca maxima is the word that was used in ancient Rome for large sewage systems. It doesn't just describe a toilet, and it doesn't just describe, running water. It describes a whole drainage system that operates. Now, the cloacas here are much smaller, and they are seen in these images. So you will notice if you look at the middle of this building, there's like a bell shape there. That is a hollow pipe that goes inside of that step, and that step goes into the earth and then goes into the ground and to the back. And you can see how it's written, drawing number 3. This is drawing number 3. Separate room, like a small closet, where the large hollow pillar also assists to support the upper story. So you can see it supports the upper story. The holes are of a small circumference, but dug to a surprising depth, and boiling water is daily poured down with which effectively prevents the least offense. So, in other words, it's to make sure that the smell of the thing does not um, basically contaminate the house and make it unlivable. The rubbish and the offal is another word for waste, of each house was burnt every morning at the back of the street, and they were as nice and cleanly in their dwellings as in their persons. Now, here's the interesting part, right? This thing of like burnt in the thing of the street, this is the same as having a system. You know how like the garbage man comes every week? This is the same thing where certain things are taken by the government and then cleaned out and thrown away. Now, of course, there's several examples of things like this inside of Africa, and this is just one of them. And we will get back to this kingdom. Now, I will link this original video that talks about this because it talks about the entire architecture of the Asante the first time I talked about it, and I didn't get too much into detail about this type of stuff, but we will read other parts because there's other parts that talk about showers and stuff like that, but that's for another day. Another easy to understand but almost never talked about is in the Getty ruins and most of the ruins inside of the Swahili coast. They had drainage systems, they had flushable toilets, they had all of that. Most people don't focus on that because the system is so sophisticated that a lot of people they just ignore it as part of ancient civilizations in general. But this is not true. Some civilizations didn't have flushable toilets or drainage systems till later. Let's read this from UNESCO. So it says, the historic town and archaeological site of Getty Surrounded by the remnant coastal forest away from the coastline, the abandoned city of Gedi was one of the most important Swahili state cities on the East African coast from the 10th to the 17th century. During this period, it was part of a complex and international network of trade and cultural exchange that crossed the Indian Ocean, linking Africa coastal centers with Persia and other areas. The opulent settlement is clearly delineated by walls and features remains of domestic, religious, and civic architecture and a sophisticated water management system. It strongly represents the characteristics of Swahili architecture and town planning, u- utilizing materials such as coral rag, coral, and earth mortar and wood. Furthermore, we can see in this citation in this area where they cite the exact type of water systems they had. So, the historic town and archaeological site of Gedi bears exceptional testimony to strong Swahili culture, tradition, development, and flourished as a result of maritime trade between the East African coast and the Indian Ocean in the 10th century. Gedi was a substantial urban settlement with outstanding features of the town planning, architecture, and infrastructure. It is distinctive for its scale, density of its urban settlement, unusual and complex spatial layout, and intricate water engineering. Now, this is the part that gets very interesting, which is the hydraulic engineering, hydraulic water systems that existed in this time. Again, it's something that is very unknown. But it's not like these water systems only were used as toilets or whatever. They were also used to spread the water throughout the entire city. So you can see there in decorative details of the mosque and tombs and in technical know-how of the wells and hydraulic systems that sustained a large urban settlement over centuries of occupation. Now, of course, I'm just starting with these because these are the highest level of technology that a lot of people associate with the world in terms of like, yes, if you have a drainage system, if you have flushable toilets, if you have any of these, then you're up there in terms of civilization. But of course, Africans cared a lot. And by the way, a lot of these are independent inventions. If you notice in the Swahili coast, they don't utilize the same systems necessarily that are found in the Middle East because they didn't have, well, they did have, but they didn't utilize the same types of materials. And so they had to advance some of these things. Another very fruitful place when looking for, especially harvesting of water and things like that. Of course, the first one would be Ethiopia, but a second one would be that of the Garamantes, and this is pretty ancient. So, what is left now of Garama, you can see that some are made of stone, some are made of clay. Most of those made of clay was the Arabs that replaced them. And some of these, this is an image of a midway town between where the Romans lived and where the Garamantes lived. And you can see again, the Garamantes were very sophisticated people back in the past. And this is, of course, from Libya in the southern parts. But why would I add this in? Well, it's because the Garamantes, like both of these others, they had systems for water control in a similar way. But in fact, they had one that was similar to some of the canals or channels that you would find in Ethiopia and places like that. If we read this from Oxford University, Fogaras and Garamantes hydraulic landscapes in the Central Sahara, hundreds of underground irrigation canals or canals, similar to the Persian qanats, but known locally as fogaras, have been recorded in Fezzan, Libya's southern desert province. Radiocarbon dating of the fogaras and associated sites has shown conclusively that these were in use from 400 BC to AD 700. This corresponds to the heyday of the people known as the Garamantes, who can arguably be identified as the earliest polity of the in the Central Sahara. In this paper, the authors explore the relationship between the development of the Garamantian state and the development of the complex irrigation systems. We consider the role of a hyper arid environment and its impact on the adoption of the intensive oasis agriculture and potential for declining water tables and failing fogaras to have contributed to the decline of the Garamantian power and cohesion. We also consider the human dimension of technological innovation and managerial responses to creating a constantly evolving set of irrigation systems with corresponding evidence for cooperation and conflict. Perhaps the most interesting thing about the system in this area is that even through the era of the Kanem Bornu, this system was still carried on. And even till today, they still have this same or similar system. The Garamantes, just like every other place in Africa, did suffer from one thing, which is that a lot of the times we have to find these systems themselves. We have to find them being utilized on their own rather than find them written down on a piece of paper somewhere, although there are some people who write about them. And it's always interesting in Africa how things that people think, oh, these are like foreign or these are never going to be things found in Africa. It's always interesting that there's always an equivalent of it in Africa. And the unique thing is that there's more than one in Africa, one way. So obviously I mixed a lot of different water systems here, from like sewage control to, which by the way I haven't even talked about that at all, like how the people used to, I heard a long time ago that in China the way they used to control that was to spread it into the furthest parts of the city. And then I realized that they do that in Africa as well. I actually had no idea until I read it. um so you got that control. You have the pipes. You have farming, the way that farm water is targeted to specific places, the canals, the systems of using hills to direct water to specific locations, dams, wells, all kinds of technologies that are utilized in order to make sure, well, if we take the Swahili coast as well, we got flushable toilets, and also the Asante, we got flushable toilets. But it's always surprising to know how deep the history is going to get and how much there's just technology, which by the way, again, I haven't even started talking about it. Let me show you something that is not related to this, but I was looking at it because I didn't want it to be a thing of just about water systems. I wanted it to be about cleaning. But I realized if I do that, I know the video is going to be short and that sucks, but it's better to just isolate these on their own. I was going to make a video about just cleaning in general and how clean they are, and I was going to utilize this statement used by one of the Portuguese writer who writes in, I think it's the sixth paragraph, utensílios para limpeza da boca e cabelos, utensils to clean the mouth. So basically ways of cleaning the mouth and stuff like that. And this is the thing about Africa that is the very interesting piece of information, just how obsessed they are with cleaning.
Just direct that to the plant. Super simple. Another means is Mr. Peary. What he would do is at the base of his hill, where the slope was steeper, where it became more gradual and soil started to accumulate rather than be eroded away, he dug what he calls an immigration center. okay, this reservoir. So he dug it right down to the bedrock, here he welcomes the rain. And I couldn't understand this idea of an immigration center when he first mentioned it. And I said, why? You know, you're teaching me about water. Why are you talking about immigration all of a sudden? He said, no, you don't understand. When it rains, I stand here, not in the bottom of the reservoir, but the top, and I shout out to the rain, welcome to my country. Now I will tell you where you will live, in the soil. And okay, and I talked to his neighbors, and they confirm this. He does this.
So we can talk about this another time because I can't. There's a video on this, and I can't find the video. But right now, you saw that previous video, which talks about the traditional way of harvesting rain in Africa. But you can see here it says understanding past water management is crucial to address contemporary human environment challenges in sub-Saharan Africa, where urban growth is impacting upon water availability and supply. This study integrates soil profiles, high resolution topographic data, historical sources, and socio ecological memory to reconstruct how the ancient urban society of Great Zimbabwe negotiated water security. New evidence shows for the first time that closed depression known as Daga pits were used by the inhabitants of Great Zimbabwe for water storage and harvesting for a long time, possibly since the emergence of settlements in the mid second millennium CE. These pits were part of a landscape scale water management system that exploited catchment hydrology and groundwater by means of artificial Daga reservoirs, wells, and springs to secure water for substance farming, ritual, and ceremonial service. This study highlights the need for precise dating of the construction and functioning period of this water management system in Great Zimbabwe, understanding past water management in such a water scarce region is important for reconstructing how the ancient Great Zimbabwe urban society negotiated water security, but also for understanding contemporary human environmental challenges. So I hope you enjoyed this video. There's more to say on this. I just wanted to give a swift or a fast introduction into it. And yes, Africans did utilize several types of things. Now, there are things called latrines, right, that I didn't talk about that are all over North Africa. But we all know that North Africa utilized some of the Roman technologies in order to build some of those. And we know that some of the pits that existed in Africa that are utilized for, you know, going to the bathroom and stuff like that. Those are things we don't need to highlight because those are like obvious pieces of information. So, yeah, have a nice day. Thank you very much.